The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Charter Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. And let's connect you this morning with Delegate Chris Jones. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning, Woody. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, and thank you for being here. I know how busy you are. You chair the Appropriations Committee, and I believe you presented a bill at 7 a.m.
Yes, sir, 7 a.m., and I've got something at 8:45, so it's just the way it is. I mean, this is a part of the program where it starts to get very busy.
Now, tell us a little bit about Suffolk, where you are from, the geography, some of the really neat things to do there, and a little bit about your constituency.
Well, you know, I grew up in Chuckatuck, a little village, part of Nansemond County, merged back in 1974 to create the consolidated city of Suffolk. We've got the Dismal Swamp, Nansemond Indians, so, you know, a lot of water, you know, creeks and rivers. And so we're very blessed. We have a lot of outdoor activities, but we've grown a lot in the last 15 years with Interstate 664, kind of coming straight through, going, you know, from Suffolk over to Newport News, Hampton. That's changed the landscape tremendously. But been there all my life. Played a lot of baseball, rode a lot of bikes when I was a kid, and just a neat place to grow up.
I think you've got one of the largest lakes in the state there as well.
Yeah, the Lake Drummond, you know, Great Dismal Swamp, and of course, you know, it's 430 square miles is the one encompasses the city of Suffolk. And of course, we supply the water for Norfolk and Portsmouth. They've got their lakes there that, you know, supply the water supply for those two cities and most of the region.
Known for peanuts too, I take it.
So obviously, they had the 100th anniversary, I think, last year. Planters did, and you know, when I was mayor way back in the day, we were able to keep the plant in Suffolk, so they've been a new plant, I guess not new any longer, it's like 20 years ago. So they're an icon, of course, for the city. Mr. Oversee was very good, created Oversee Hospital in memory of his wife back in the mid-40s. So we're steeped in, we got a lot of history of those who really care about the community and give back and philanthropic.
So where do people work there?
Well, you know, we used to have the Joint Forces Command, now it's Cyber Command up in the northern part of the city. You've got Lipton Tea, you know, they just expanded last year, and we've got you know, a couple of industrial parks that we've got QVC and some other entities, and you know, used to be Hills Brothers Coffee. So you know, we're diverse in that regard. A lot of Old Dominion's got their modeling and simulation center in Suffolk, kind of Suffolk Portsmouth, and a lot of technology, a lot of modeling and simulation. So it's really diverse from when I was a kid growing up, which is good for us and good for the region and good for the Commonwealth.
And in the region, you're blessed with a good mix of junior colleges and universities.
Oh yeah, I mean the two-year colleges is, you know, Mills Godwin. I was born in Chuckatuck and knew him very well, not politically, but more as you know, friends of his family, because my sister was friends with his daughter, and so you know, knew Mills and Catherine very well because he started the community college system back in his first term. And we have benefited greatly, the Commonwealth. We've got Tower Community College, we've got Paul D. Camp, and then we've got, of course, Old Dominion, Christopher Newport, some wonderful private institutions. We've got Norfolk State. So, yeah, we're blessed in Hampton Roads with a lot of educational opportunities for our citizens.
Great. Well, tell us about the work of the Appropriations Committee. That's a pretty dynamic committee. You're going to be involved in the budget, as you always are, but give us a taste of what it's like to chair that committee.
I'm still learning. It's funny. I don't feel as busy because I'm not going to as many meetings. I've got many more meetings, but they all kind of come to me in the sense that, you know, we sit down with the subcommittee chairs or with groups, because I have 7 less meetings that I go to as far as I don't serve on any subcommittees now as chairman. So I had 4 subcommittees. I don't serve on general laws any longer, which I used to chair, which is 2 meetings a week. So I've got 7 less meetings, which really helps because time really gets, a day becomes tomorrow in a hurry for me. You know, we've got, gosh, I guess it's 2 weeks from Sunday we get the budget out. Crossover when we have to get our bills out of the House that are non-revenue or appropriations will be, I think, on the 8th. I believe that's right. And then that next Sunday, and we'll bring out the budget. So we're getting into the busy schedule. We're hearing budget amendments this week from all the members and bills, and then we'll start crystallizing in about a week and a half. And then 2 weeks from today and tomorrow, the subcommittees will be putting the final touches on the House budget, and it will come out on that Sunday. And then the following week, what will occur, it'll be debated on that Thursday, which is 3 weeks from today. So we got a busy 3 weeks. Like I said, I'm blessed with a good staff, wonderful staff. Got a lot of hardworking members on the committee. We picked up 6 new members this time, 3 from Hampton Roads. Chris Stolley, Barry Knight, both from Virginia Beach, and Dawn Hester from Norfolk. So we're well represented on the committee, Hampton Roads. They're very dedicated public servants, and so I'm very blessed to lead a committee with 21 other members and a staff that really understands what their commitment needs to be, and that is to the people of the Commonwealth.
One of the cabinet members that the new governor reappointed is Rick Brown, and I know there have been a number of presentations about the revenues that the state is getting from its citizens. What does that look like at this point?
Well, first thing about Rick. 4 years ago when Bob McDonnell first took office, I called him in December and said, the first thing you need to do is call Rick Brown and beg him to stay. Of course, Rick did, stayed for the 4 years, which served Bob and the Commonwealth very, very well. Governor McCall did the same thing. Rick we'd already given him a plaque. After 40 years of service, he was going to be retiring. But the public servant that he is, he agreed to stay on. And his knowledge of the state budget and the workings of the state, I'm just amazed. So I'm very thankful that he is there. And but as far as the revenues are concerned, we're running about 1% behind our collections year to date. The governor left $51 million in unappropriated balances, which was very smart on his part, because if we don't meet certain targets, then we'll have to dig into any reserves that we might have. So we're running behind. We'll anxiously await 7th of next month when we get the revenue collections in for January, because January will contain the sales tax collections for December, which is a very important season for us. Sales tax about 20% of what we collect. So we're running behind. We think we'll make it up in May, but we have to get our budget done by March the 8th. So we can't, bet on the fact that we're going to get there. We've got to base it on where we are year to date and kind of time and space in that regard. So comforting that Rick is there. We need to be very thoughtful and very conservative in our projections of our expenditures because right now I don't think there's a lot of confidence that the economy is going to turn around. I think the Fed chairman in Richmond said, last week or 2 weeks ago, 2% growth, I think, for 14. Right. And we typically grow out of a recession about 5 to 5.5, and we're half of that. So we've got to be very careful in that regard.
Now, you mentioned the reserve. Is that separate and apart from the rainy day fund?
Yes, sir. That's why you like to have a balance.
Right.
That's the unappropriated balance. And, and it's very complicated to get into it, but the Constitution sets out the rainy day fund on the way it's set up. So when we get done with this next budget cycle, the next 2 years, we'll have over $1 billion in the rainy day fund. And we can't touch that unless our revenues are below 2% below what they were projected. So you just can't touch it when you want to. When it was voted on by the people of Virginia, they wanted that to be there as our rainy day fund, truly in an emergency, not because we didn't want to make tough decisions. So that's comforting to know that we have that there. And
there's also a fact fund that was created in order to mitigate the impact of sequestration, I believe.
Correct. And there have been some grants with that. And McDonnell felt very strongly about having that, and I think the bond rating agencies liked the idea. And we went up last November, I guess, and met with them October, November. And they mentioned the reforms that we'd made to VRS, the transportation investments that we had just made, and the fact that we were trying to brace for sequestration and other cuts that might come from Washington. Because as you know, we've talked about this before, we're number 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you rank it, and the receipt of federal funds, whether it's boots on the ground, or technology investments, or contracts, federal contracts, etc., federal employees. So we have to be very mindful of that.
And of course, unlike the federal government, the state of Virginia is required to balance its budget.
Our pluses must equal our minuses, and we cannot borrow money to sustain our operations. And I was kidding someone the other week, this would be my 13th, I think, year on appropriations. I'm still waiting for the year that we have money to spend. Every year we're trying to find additional cuts to right size and just live within our means. And we've done that, and that's what we have to do at home. It's not a problem doing it, but it's just not always what people want to hear, because you want to invest where you need to and where you should.
7 a.m. presentation on a bill that you're pursuing that has to do with the Midtown Downtown Tunnel, I believe.
Indirectly, yes, sir. It's called the Hampton Roads Accountability Commission. Of course, last year the bill was 2313. It was a speaker's bill that dealt with transportation. And in that bill was regional components for Northern Virginia and for Hampton Roads. And Hampton Roads gets about between 180 to up to probably 225 million a year in additional funds just for the region. Did not have any bonding authority for those dollars. After we've gone through the Midtown Downtown ordeal for the last couple of years, it's evident to myself and to many other members that we don't want Richmond deciding our destiny when it comes to putting a toll or how they, really how we conduct our business with this money that is ours, that's generated by the region, for the region, to stay in the region. So the House bill will do the following. It creates bonding authority. It creates tolling authority. In other words, it won't reside any longer if the bill passes with Richmond. It will reside with this commission. And the commission is going to be made up of the 14 members, that represent the Planning District Commission, plus 3 legislators, and then 4 non-voting members. And the way it's configured, is the chief elected officers have to serve. You can't have a designee. And most of the mayors in Hampton Roads are elected directly by the people. The members in the assembly are directly elected by their districts. So you have to be within that region if you're going to be a House member or a senator on that commission.
So there's accountability.
There's accountability. So if they were to go and do something and want to put a toll on a road, then you can actually go in and say, I don't want the toll. And if they don't listen to you and you don't like what they've done, then they have recourse to be able to get you out of office. The way the Midtown Downtown deal worked, the Secretary of Transportation pretty much negotiated that deal, and we were stuck with it for the next 53, 54 years. And tolls, are beginning 3 years prior to construction completed with increased capacity, which I think is the first time.
They begin this weekend, I believe.
I believe it's Saturday. Yeah, Saturday it is. So that's what that bill does. The administration is supportive of it, and it came out of committee unanimously. And it's my hope that when it gets to the Senate, I think Senator Wagner has a similar bill, which came out, I think, unanimous yesterday off the Senate floor. And so we'll hopefully get that in conference if it needs to go into conference and to get to the governor's desk. And then we'll be able to bond those revenues. We'll be able to determine which projects are important. Because as you and I have talked before, the money we spent to mitigate the tolls for that, 13 months or whatever it was, would have built segment 1 on 64.
Right.
We could have built 6 lanes from Bland Boulevard up to Fort Eustis. And that, it's kind of irritating to me that we put good money after a bad deal that was signed by someone that we could not really say we were upset with them and have any, you could not change the outcome of what occurred.
Right. Now, in spite of your efforts here, and I know you're going to be successful, your phone is likely to be ringing off the hook shortly once those tolls are in
Yes,
place.
Sir. Yeah. And the governor put additional money, working with the Secretary of Transportation, to cut them in half, which I think was a reasonable approach, given the fact that you're not benefiting from any increased capacity. When they're completed in 3 years, you'll have another tube, which will have 2 lanes each way in the Midtown, and you're getting a benefit then. But right now, the benefit is not being received.
Talk to us about the importance of the Port of Virginia.
Very, very important. A lot's been going on at the port in the last couple of years. I carried the bill last year to make sure they couldn't privatize it without the commissioners wanting to do it. They couldn't receive an unsolicited proposal. Port volume's up. They're still struggling a little bit with their profit and loss because of some of the structure that they've got. They're still trying to work through some duplications with the old Virginia International Terminals and the Port Authority. They've kind of merged that together. So, they're economic engine for us. And container volume is continuing to increase. And what we've got to do is be adequately positioned with distribution centers. We've got the inland port in Front Royal. We've got the Port of Richmond. And I know from talking with the Secretary that they've got some designs on some distribution centers, some warehouse that they can do up here using the barge, trucking containers up and down the James River. So it's vitally important to our economy. I mean, the number of jobs created are just phenomenal for us. And when you look at what they're going to do at Norfolk International Terminal, they're going to really go in and upgrade that with the number of rail cars they can move in and out. And so they're doing a lot of upgrading of their equipment.
I understand there is competition. Port of Charleston, for example,
Yes,
in
sir.
New York, we have some competitive advantages now because our port is so deep, but there is competition out there.
That's a great point. I think Charleston or either Savannah are going to 45 or 46 or 47 feet. We're at 50 right now. And there's money in the budget, about $6.5 million, to start the process for us to go to 55 feet. 55 feet would give us a decided advantage, and then we'd be first port of call and last port of call. That's very important. And currently, for coal, for example, they only load those colliers about 60%, and they carry them out into the ocean basically, and then they have to bring the next 30 or 40%, and then they have to transfer it over to that vessel. So if we went to 55 feet, they could be fully loaded at the dock, and then they could just go straight out. So it make us much more efficient and have a huge impact economically. So that's one of our top priorities, is to making sure that we continue along the line of getting that 55-foot approval, and then we would be ahead of everyone else, and we'd be, I think, the first on the East Coast to have that approval.
And of course, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But that's a drawn-out process. We got to get the monies to continue, proceeding with that.
Right, right. And traffic is going to increase. At least the traffic's going to get bigger and bigger in terms of how much those tankers can hold because of what's going on at the Panama
Canal. That's exactly right. And I was down there last fall, and they're going to be ready, I think, in less than a year to begin that process. And they're going to go from carrying 12, 13,000 to carrying 3,000 and 4,000 more units. But the good news is our cranes go 22 across. So we've got the largest cranes, I think, in the world, quite frankly. Now, some of the pains from the growth of the port are the rail traffic. And Suffolk is impacted. I've been working with the Department of Rail and Public Transit, with the Secretary, with the City of Suffolk. And we've convened one meeting already, and we're going to try to get some relief working with the Port of Virginia to help on with 2 or 3 of the rail crossings, at-grade rail crossings in Suffolk. Because then now we've got, we're stacking trains, 2 abreast on the weekends. I see when I might go into Portsmouth and Norfolk, you can see them lined up in the middle of the Western Freeway. Wow. So we've got our challenges as well as opportunities. Now,
you mentioned the inland port at Front Royal. Is that a distribution center?
Yes, it goes up on rail, and then it kind of goes out to the hinterlands. But with the, Heartland Corridor project with Norfolk Southern and now the National Gateway project, they'll be able to stack them too high for both lines. Norfolk Southern can do it now with the Heartland Corridor. So that's why the rail capacity has increased so dramatically, because now you can stack 2 instead of 1.
Right. And of course, the other big economic driver, and we talked about sequestration and its adverse impact, are the military installations.
Yes, sir. And who knows what's going to happen with that? Is it going to be another BRAC? We don't know. But we've been very proactive. I know the McDonnell administration was very concerned about that, because we were kind of caught flat-footed years ago. And I know that Governor McAuliffe and his team is very concerned. They've been working with the regional leaders. So I don't think that we'll be caught flat-footed. We're making our case. He brought Admiral Harvey on to his, in his cabinet. He's he just, second to none, and he knows it, inside and out. So he'll be a huge asset to us as we try to mitigate and deal with those issues. And that's why the transportation last year was so important, because now they know that we're committed to helping get their ships in and out, troops in and out, and their soldiers and sailors can get around the community and have the quality of life that they need.
Because at one point, Oceana was at risk, was it not?
Yes, sir. And we spent a fair amount of money there with going in purchasing property in what they call the the landing areas. Fentress Field as well in Chesapeake, which are part of Chesapeake. So we try to have a coordinated effort. And there's been some question about Langley on the peninsula. So we've got to be mindful of that. So we're trying to be proactive and preserving the assets that we have. And building on them.
And we've been very proactive in terms of encouraging veterans who remain here after their service, and also those who are returning home from the theaters of war.
Absolutely.
Encouraging them to go to school. Right. Encouraging them to become entrepreneurs.
Right. And Governor McDonnell had like the one-stop thing for veterans. Been working very diligently for the last 3 or 4 years. Terry Suit, former secretary, And that will be continued by this administration because the sacrifice that they make for us, we take so much for granted. Just you and I sitting here talking today. We can express our opinions freely. And they're fighting for our freedom, and the sacrifices that they make are second to none.
One of the biggest items this year is the expansion of Medicaid.
Yes,
We've
sir.
got the Medicaid Innovation Reform Commission. There was a presentation just yesterday by Dr. Bill Hazel relating to Medicaid expansion. Where does that all stand now from your point of view?
Well, the Merck Commission was established in the budget of last year. It was put in the Code of Virginia. And I think it's 8 members or maybe 10 members, I believe. Senate and House have equal representation. And they've been about going through the process of reforms, looking at the reforms. And we've got like 3 phases or 4 phases of reforms. And we're like in the first phase of implementing. Phase 1 has been implemented. Phase 2, we're beginning to implement those. But the toughest changes are going to be Phase 3, which is managed care for those waiver populations, for the DD and the ID populations, and also for long-term care. Presentation that we had yesterday, we had MCV Hospital, we had UVA, because they do a lot of indigent care. And so the long and the short of it from the House's perspective, and my position is, reforms have to come first before we can look to expand Medicaid. I'm not sure we ever expand Medicaid as we know it. I think it'll probably be a private sector solution. It won't be, what we've done in the past. But right now, Medicaid is growing at about an 8% rate per year. We've got certain populations in the Medicaid of existing Medicaid that aren't in managed care. We've got to get those under, managed care control, the MCOs. And then what we've got to see are the savings going to be there that we expect before we look to expand. Because if we expand, we'll never turn back the clock. And if we don't get it right the first time, then we won't have a chance to get it right the second time. And like you said earlier, our pluses have to equal our minuses. And there's no free money. Even if we get all this money in the first couple of years, 100% by the federal government, I got to look at the out years and what the cost is to the Commonwealth. And so I've been very, very firm in the fact that reforms first, and then we look to maybe do some expansion after we get those reforms.
And it's a pretty complicated subject,
a very complicated
because
subject.
we have the Affordable Care Act,
Yes,
which has some Medicare cuts and other things. Then we've got the existing Medicaid population in the state that's growing.
Correct.
And so if you're going to expand that, that just adds additional dollars.
That's correct. And that's the hard thing for people to really understand. That even for me, sometimes I got to sit down and really separate, one from the other. And the way I likened it the other week was the apples are the Medicare cuts, and the oranges are the Medicaid cuts. And the Medicaid cuts aren't going into effect for the hospitals until a couple of years. They've been delayed 2 years. So they're not impending. They're not here today. But what you're hearing from the hospitals and from the other parties are the following. We're getting cut on the Medicare side of the house, on the DRGs, which is the diagnostic groups, and on some buying, a 1% and a 1.25%, up to 2% over like 5 years. And they're not insignificant cuts. But I don't control that as a state legislator. That was done by the federal government. And so I don't feel like we should make a decision based on what some think was a very bad law, the Affordable Care Act, and the way it was constructed. There were some good parts of it, but most of the parts of it were not good, and the way it was funded and just the way they went about it. So we shouldn't be pressured into do Medicaid just because this is a bad bill, it's falling apart basically, it's not working as they had hoped, to make that part right. I think I have a fiduciary responsibility as a member of the Appropriations Committee and as chairman to make sure that our approach is measured, we make sure that we get the reforms, they're in place, and they're working as they're purported to work.
We've got a growing population of dual eligibles,
Yes, sir.
do we not? Those are the elderly who are on Medicare, but they're also poor.
Correct.
And they wind up in nursing homes, and Medicaid basically pays for that.
That's correct, and that goes back to the 70-30 and 30-70. They're about 30% of our population, but they use about 70% of our cost. So that's one of the reforms in Phase 3. Is doing the coordination as a demonstration project of taking the Medicaid, Medicare population and making sure that Medicare is paying for its share before Medicaid pays. So, that's another thing that we're trying to wring some unnecessary costs out of the system. And that's the toughest you know, those reforms are going to be the toughest. So I just can't say, trust me, it's going to happen. I've got to take a very measured approach.
And then to complicate things further, we've got a settlement with the Department of Justice
Correct.
that deals with our training centers around
Yes,
the
sir.
state.
And did we talk about this before we sit down? And you're asking all the right questions. And that goes back to my point of wanting to go slow. 2 years ago, when Secretary Hazel was briefing the Appropriations Committee, the conferees, they told us the DOJ settlement would cost us about $340 million over 10 years. The latest cost is double that. And my sense is it'll probably close to $650 to $700 million.
But that's going to result in the gradual closing of some of the training centers and putting people in a community-based setting.
Because of the Olmstead Act, they have the right to be in the community if they want to. But we have to. So we had a settlement with the Department of Justice, and it's been entered into. So we have to do this. And so, you know, a cost that was going to be X is now 2 times X. And we have to pay for that with state dollars. And so that's why I think if history is any indication or experience, we need to go slow and make sure that we got it right before we do it.
And, of course, you're getting a lot of pushback from a lot of parents who have adult children in those facilities because they're concerned about this community-based setting and whether it's going to be adequate.
That's correct. And you're exactly right. And they do not have to leave that setting. The way the law, the interpretation of the settlement, from my understanding, is if they want to, you have to provide them a slot in the community. Because there are many, and you're right, that do not want to leave. They want to stay.
We've got 2 minutes left, but I want you to talk about mental health reform as a result of the tragedy of one of your colleagues in the Senate. This issue has been with us before even Virginia Tech, but now we're faced with it again.
Like everyone, my heart broke when I heard the news, you know, back in November. It's been around a long time as far as the issues that we're trying to deal with, and we've got a couple of special subcommittees working on it. I'll be brief tomorrow on what the latest is what we're looking to do. We're going to find that requisite dollars that are going to be needed and necessary to make sure that we've got probably a bed of first resort or last resort that comes from the Commonwealth. They're looking to extend the emergency custody orders from maybe 6 hours to longer, and the temporary detention orders from, you know, the time it is now to probably, you know, 70, maybe probably 72 or, you know, 4 or 5 days. Who knows? I'm not sure what they're going to recommend to us, but that has a cost. And so we've got to then, it's got to come up to us basically for our consideration to make sure we've got the dollars that are needed and necessary. But, you know, this is not a Republican or Democrat or Senate and the House. We're all looking at it as Virginians trying to come up with a solution.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Delegate Chris Jones, Chairman of the Appropriations Committee.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Charter Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.